All right, let's go ahead and open up. Welcome to the PDG B-5 Governance Learning Session. Today, our session title is Sustaining Early Childhood Governance. And before we begin, I have just a few housekeeping items that I'm going to share. For those of you that have been to several of our PDG B-5 conferences, you're well aware of our request, but we would first like you to, if you haven't done so already, change your Zoom name to include your state along with your name, first and last, so that we can be sure to connect you with your location. That really helps as you can see who all's in the session and helps with any other discussions or networking throughout the session. If you have any questions about how to do that, please chat us, but I think you all are pros at that these days. The next housekeeping item, again, if you've joined only by phone and haven't done so already, or I'm sorry, only by both screen and phone, and haven't connected your phone to your screen name, here's some instructions on how to do that. Click on switch to phone audio, enter your participant ID when you call in. That way we make sure that we don't have you twice on the screen in case you're asking any questions or have any comments that you'd like to make during the session. Any questions on that? We're happy to hear from you. During the presentation, please use the chat. We'd like to hear your questions and your ideas. This is a call that we want to make sure you're also muting yourself while you're speaking so that our speakers' voices will come through loud and clear. All right, so again, as I mentioned, today's session is focused on sustaining early childhood governance. I'm thrilled, and I think you're going to have an interesting and engaging presentation today with our presenters. I'm going to pull this down, and it's a pleasure for me to introduce to you who our presenters are going to be today. I'll start with Dr. Dan Worry. He's the Senior Director of Early Learning at the Hunt Institute. Next, Dr. Lauren Zabinski is a Senior Policy Analyst with Early Learning at the Hunt Institute. Karen McKnight, Senior Policy Analyst, Early Learning at the Hunt Institute. Chris Perry, Deputy Secretary of Early Childhood Development, California Health and Human Services Agency and Senior Advisor to the Governor of California. And Arissa Cooley, Project Director, Preschool Development Grant Birth Through 5 with WestEd. And again, I think we're in for a great presentation today. And at this point in time, Lauren, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here with you all. As was mentioned, my name is Lauren Zabinski here at the Hunt Institute. And we're really excited to start our conversation today on early childhood governance and then this idea of sustaining early childhood governance. And as we do today, our 90 minutes together is going to be broken into 3 different categories. And we like to share this ahead of the time because we kind of like to laugh that in being able to share and say, don't worry, we are not breaking you into small breakout groups. Instead, we are changing the format to deliver content to you in a variety of different ways. So we'll start today with an overview of early childhood governance that we are seeing kind of across the nation and strategies that states are taking to implement an improvement in early childhood governance. We're going to follow that with a great state spotlight with our friends in California. And then we'll wrap up our conversation today, joined with additional presenters and have a fireside chat with some state leaders in California to further discuss strategies and ideas and considerations that you all should have in implementing or reviewing governance in your state. So to get us started today, one of the first kind of pieces is to really lay the groundwork, right? To lay the foundation. And we do that with this question of why. Why are we talking about early childhood governance? Why are we bringing this into the forefront of our conversations? And why are states placing so much emphasis in addressing this topic. As we look to this question, really we're seeing two themes arise as in response to this why early childhood governance. The first is early brain development. We all know, and I recognize that this is content everyone on this call knows through and through because it is the field in which we work. But we know that 90% of a child's brain is developed before that age of 5. And all of these areas of sensory language, cognitive functions, this is why we all place the emphasis and the time and dedication and passion into the field of early care and learning. But we also know that this is the why we should be considering conversations around early childhood governance. States are starting to recognize this opportunity and the importance of these pivotal years and looking for ways that they can support and improve the early childhood system. The pandemic has increased the attention in improving the system. And naturally, we start looking at where are our early childhood programs, where is the system developed, where is it housed, and how can we strengthen that? As we look to better ways to support these pivotal years and how we can strengthen it, it actually brings us to the second piece of the themes to this why we discuss governance. And it's this response that we, although would like to look at strengthening the system, that system in itself is extremely fragmented. We know it's lacking a durable infrastructure, and often it's spread across multiple agencies and departments, as you can see depicted here in this graphic. Our early childhood care and learning programs within states can range from being housed at the Department of Education to the Governor's Office, Health and Human Services, and sometimes even at institutes of higher education. So looking through that, it naturally, we see you can imagine your state and think of the early care and learning programs and kind of map them on this graphic here on the slide. And it already starts to develop this very messy little web of system and web of programs. So that's what pulls us back to this conversation of why. Why are we talking about early childhood governance? And how can we look to improve the system and to improve the experience of those pivotal years for children? As states are starting to have these conversations and look to ways to support, we're seeing that the strategies taken are falling under three main themes here outlined by our friends at ECS, Education Commission of the States. The first theme, kind of approach to improving the early childhood governance, is coordination. And this is where the system, there are still authority and accountability for the early learning programs. It's still spread across multiple agencies, but what you're seeing is an intentionality behind peer agency coordination and coordinating through maybe a centralized location like a governor's office. The second kind of strategy that states are starting to take is this idea of consolidation and placing authority and accountability for the system in one administrative office or one branch, allowing for that development of implementation oversight across multiple programs, but kind of housed and reporting to one consolidated effort of reporting process. The third strategy that we're seeing states take to improve their early childhood governance is this creation strategy, which is exactly as it outlines. It's creating a new executive branch, agency, or entity within one kind of existing agency. Maybe they have created a brand new entity, but all of your early learning programs and systems start to transfer and transition into this one location, having created then an Office of Early Childhood and an Office of Early Learning to take what was that very fragmented system and bringing it to one centralized location. So this all sounds like great information, but what makes it real is to actually hear and see firsthand what some of those these strategies, look like in real life. So at this time, I'd like to bring my colleague, Dan Worry, introduce him and bring him up to the conversation to talk us through what we are seeing firsthand in some of our states.
Lauren, thank you so much. And hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to be with you to talk about early childhood governance today. It's an area that we at the Hunt Institute have been doing, an increasing amount of work here over the past couple of years. As Lauren mentioned, there really is no single system of early childhood governance across the states, in part because of its complexity. Unlike K-12 education, which is at least somewhat self-contained, early childhood systems are intended to meet the comprehensive needs of young children and their families. And meeting those needs often entails a very large number of programs and funding streams. We've got childcare and pre-kindergarten and early intervention. We've got maternal child health programs. We've got states that are implementing developmental screening initiatives, the child and adult care food program, Head Start, home visiting. The list goes on and on from there. That's really actually only scratching the surface in some state settings in particular. And each of these programs comes attached to often federal and in many cases state and local funding streams. And to complicate things still further, these funding streams often come with really distinct eligibility requirements and particularly in the case of federal initiatives, sometimes very elaborate rules and regulations. And so it really, as Lauren mentioned, is not uncommon, and maybe this has been the experience in your state as well, but not uncommon to see these programs spread across 4 or 5 or even 6 or more state agencies. So this can lead really to a whole list of really undesirable outcomes, right? Programs get siloed. We have a failure to coordinate and communicate adequately in many cases. There is a duplication of effort. There is frequently a duplication of administrative costs to have these programs housed across multiple different state agencies. But probably most significantly and importantly, these fragmented systems make things confusing for families, right? We create these sort of bureaucratic mazes for families that are seeking service that frankly are hard for us to even map out an outline on the professional side, and much less being a family seeking service. So the sad truth is that early childhood systems have all the potential in the world to be kind of a mess. And I know that that's something that a lot of you in the context of your preschool development grants, Birth to 5, have really been exploring carefully. And the good news is that in recent years, states are really accelerating their efforts to make sure that this is no longer the case. So in just a few moments, we're going to turn things over to our colleagues in California to speak in detail about the state's master plan for early childhood, which is kind of a unifying framework that they have designed to align and coordinate and optimize resources across the system. It's a very impressive effort, and we'll really spend the bulk of this hour learning lessons from California. But before we do, wanted to kick off by spending just a few moments, as Lauren mentioned, sharing some other recent examples of coordination, consolidation, and creation, the three gears that Lauren displayed on the PowerPoint slide there. We at the Hunt Institute have been lucky enough to play a role over the past 2 years or so in supporting many of these states, and incidentally would encourage you to reach out as you're having conversations about your own state system. We'd love to talk about how we might be a support to you. To be clear, though, there really is no one right way to do this. States have a wide variety of structures in place, and independent of structure, we've identified some commonalities across them, certainly by aligning programs We see states eliminating duplication and streamlining processes. We've seen a lot of states create common eligibility processes and not only no wrong door approaches, which I think was a popular term for a long time. We want no wrong door, but increasingly states are saying we want fewer doors. We want to simplify this for families, and we'll talk about how California is doing that. But just a couple of examples of what other states are doing, and we'll begin in that coordination category where there is a deliberate effort underway to sort of synchronize and coordinate across these programs. And in some of these cases, the programs may still well be spread across multiple different agencies, but there is a structure in place to really think through how to align those agencies. I'm happy to begin by lifting up an example from my own home state of South Carolina that was actually inspired by the groundbreaking work that was done in North Carolina under the leadership of our namesake at the Hunt Institute, North Carolina Governor Jim Hunt, who created Smart Start in North Carolina in 1993. The example in South Carolina is South Carolina First Steps to School Readiness. I see Karen Oliver is on the call today. Karen, it's great to see you here. First Steps is the state's public-private early childhood agency, and one of the variations that South Carolina has put in place is that First Steps is a little bit more embedded within the context of state government formally. It is charged not only with the oversight of an umbrella sort of network of 46 local First Steps partnerships at the county level, but also the administration of important programs at the state level. It was, for example, the home for a number of years to the state's IDEA Part C early intervention program, prior to a move that aligned it into the Medicaid agency to support its funding. But First Steps currently co-administers pre-K alongside the South Carolina Department of Education. The state has a mixed delivery system wherein the Department of Education oversees that program in public school districts, and First Steps works with private and faith and community-based preschool providers all around the state. The agency, though, is overseen by a board of trustees that I think is a wonderful example of a coordinated approach to governance. The board is chaired at any given time by either the sitting governor or his designee, includes the state superintendent of education and the directors of all of the major child-serving agencies in the state. And so in that sense, it functions as sort of a de facto children's cabinet for the state. I want to differentiate between a children's cabinet in this sense and a cabinet agency. And in a cabinet agency, typically the governor appoints a director, and it may be that agency is a part of the governor's cabinet and meets with other agencies. This is a little different variation, one that is really uniquely focused on kids, though. So this is a table at which leaders from the various different agencies in South Carolina pull together at the same table to have a conversation, not as maybe they would in a gubernatorial cabinet meeting about roads and taxes and every other topic under the sun, but really pulls this group together to talk about the needs of young children and families in the state. The First Steps Board of Trustees is incidentally named as the State Early Childhood Advisory Council in South Carolina, which is a structure that all of you at least should have in some form. I recognize that those advisory councils in some cases were a little more robust a number of years ago when there was some funding attached, but that's the State Advisory Council structure really is one great effort to coordinate. Texas is another wonderful example. In fact, I will name this position with the caveat that Lauren actually served in this role prior to coming to the Hunt Institute, but Texas has created an interagency deputy director who reports in this case across 4 different state agencies and serves kind of as the glue that holds those early childhood programs together. And so that's a unique approach to this puzzle as well, creating this sort of interagency position. There are probably lots of other examples that many of your states are enacting. I know that in North Carolina, there's a birth to third grade coordinating council, for example. But having some formal structure, even in the case when programs aren't consolidated or rolled into a single agency, it can be a very effective structure. Increasingly, though, I will tell you that what we are seeing is states that are moving in the direction of consolidation and or creation of new agencies altogether to sort of coordinate this work. Two great examples of consolidation that we are kind of actively working to support right now are North Dakota and Delaware. And North Dakota, they have recently enacted legislation first that creates a 4-year-old pre-kindergarten pilot program for the state. But the second piece of legislation there merges, and consolidates early childhood programs from within the Department of Public Instruction and elsewhere into the state's Department of Human Services. And so North Dakota is an example of moving services into kind of a unique division for early childhood. Delaware is taking a very similar approach, but doing it in the opposite direction. They're actually merging programs into the Department of Education. In this case, have recently moved child care licensing into the Delaware Department of Education. That transition is underway and really pretty well done. And IDEA Part C, the early intervention program, is the next one on their list. So in both North Dakota and Delaware's cases, we're seeing at least to start some limited consolidation, taking a really thoughtful approach on a little bit longer timeline where they're moving kind of a program or two programs at a time to start bringing these programs together over what they anticipate will be kind of a multi-year timeline to bring more and more of these programs together. The other, though, category that we are seeing, which certainly has its pros and cons, is this creation category, right? So that we, a good example, Alabama created their Department of Early Childhood Education a number of years ago. And, the two most recent, very prominent examples of this certainly are New Mexico, where they have created a new early childhood education and care department as a standalone cabinet agency within the state. And so it is really housing in New Mexico all of the services for young children in this brand new, the agency has been around for about a year at this point, and doing some really innovative things. If you've been watching the news from New Mexico, I think they're making a very compelling case for all of the innovation that can happen when these programs are together under a single roof. The other example right now is where I am sitting right at this moment, which is in Missouri, where Governor Parson just a few months ago issued an executive order essentially doing the same thing that New Mexico did, only rather than create a new state agency, they are creating an Office of Childhood within the state's Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And so, rather than create the new agency structure, it is all happening within the Department of Education. Definitely pros and cons, and our timing is running short here, and I want to get to our colleagues from California. But I will tell you, pros and cons to the consolidation approach, a little bit more limited kind of thoughtful timeline, moving a piece at a time. These are complex transitions, as any of you who have worked in state government, moving employees from one agency to another and merging those systems know. It's not an easy task. And so starting kind of thoughtfully and deliberately and moving in incremental steps makes a lot of sense on one hand. On the other hand, in the case of New Mexico and Missouri, in a sort of tongue-in-cheek way, I would describe it as the sort of rip the Band-Aid off approach, and moving all of those programs in one fell swoop. Certainly, that is an even greater administrative challenge. It certainly, I think, if the leaders from both of those states were on the line, would tell you that they definitely sprung a few new gray hairs in that process. a challenge, certainly to move even one program, much less consolidate all of those programs. But sometimes when the political will is there, and that's another piece of this governance conversation, when the will is there to actually get all of these programs consolidated, sometimes I think states are finding that you just need to strike when the iron is hot and get that progress made and move on from there. So I think hopefully across those slides you see a real diversity of approaches in the state. There are several other states that are moving in this creation direction. Colorado is in the process of creating now a new early childhood department for the state. Oregon is in the planning stages, and I know a number of other states have worked on that as well. So with that, I'm going to pause, sensitive to the time, and want to bring our friends from California into the conversation to talk about this amazing plan that they have put together. It is so thoughtful and well constructed that we knew it was a model that you would want to learn more about. And Chris Perry, I think I'm going to turn things over to you.
Thanks, Dan. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're viewing this session. Thank you so much for inviting us to present and discuss the Master Plan for Early Learning and Care, which is also the title of California's PDGR strategic plan. My name is Chris Perry. I'm Deputy Secretary at Health and Human Services for Early Childhood Development. I also am a Senior Advisor to the Governor on the implementation of early childhood initiatives, which ironically, only a year after he had been in office, became a very big part of the work that goes on at California Health and Human Services and the California Department of Education. We'll be hearing from colleagues there later in this session. But I also wanted to point out that in Dan's description of other states, it struck me that we're a little bit like them and a little bit not like them. And I think that is exactly the point you're making, is that we're all sort of finding our way and evolving over not just years, but really decades. And in fact, the appointment of a deputy secretary at the California Health and Human Services Agency is a first. And it was accompanied by a number of other key appointments, including Kim Johnson, who's with us today, Director of Social Services, and a first-time ever California Surgeon General, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, as well as the new president, or now not new, president of the State Board of Education, Linda Darling-Hammond, and so many others who are sitting in positions of leadership across state government who have a background in early childhood development. And so there's a wonderful diversity of leadership and teamwork going on across agencies and departments, and with departments that aren't under the governor's authority, but of course we share the same goal of serving children and improving their lives, such as the Department of Education. We'll be joined by Sarah Neville Morgan later as well. Before we cover the ground ahead on the early childhood or on the master plan, I also want to point out how important this is to us in looking at future investments and improving what we're doing in whole child, whole family efforts. So the California Health and Human Services Agency, in partnership with the Governor's Office, the Department of Social Services, and the State Board of Education, provided leadership and guidance in developing the master plan. The master plan intends to create a comprehensive early learning and care system that produces big returns in better education, health, and economic outcomes. The final plan reflects the governor's mandate and brought in key leaders to develop a 10-year plan to expand access and improve the quality of early learning and care. And we've always known that the early learning and care system was fragile. However, the past year and a half with the current pandemic experiences really showcased the true fragility of our system. And the plan really couldn't have come at a more important time to help us articulate a set of action steps to help us build back our early learning and care system and think about where we'd like to be in 10 years. The good news is that California is in the midst of planning what to do with federal relief dollars, and we're already making strides to implement recommendations within the plan. Federal and state level investments through the last budget cycle will help propel the plan's foundation to provide equity by providing each and every child a great start in life, and that prepares them for school and life. So to get to the real point here, by 2030, California will provide a comprehensive early learning and care system, will provide early learning and care for infants and toddlers, ensure that all families can easily identify, access, and choose care that meets their needs, promote school readiness through universal preschool, really exciting news there, providing relief to parents and care for children. And finally, we want to grow the quality, size, and stability of the early care and learning workforce, because we know how devastating COVID-19 has been, and of course, how fragile the system was before that. After the plan was finalized and released last December, it's already been almost a little over 10 months ago, we felt it was important to reach a broad audience, as broad an audience as possible. And so we produced not only the 100-page report that some people have actually picked up and read or printed, but we also wanted to create an interactive website to allow people to experience the master plan through its words and stories, of those that were motivated by the plan and most affected by its recommendations. From the homepage, you can download the master plan, the full plan, and a summary, and the website and master plan is also in English and Spanish. So we do hope that if you're interested in either looking at the summary or interacting with certain questions and answers contained in the plan, that you will visit the URL. We can drop it in the chat, californiaforallkids.chhs.ca.gov. We also really, in order to bring it to life, wanted to create a few videos that would essentially, give you the essence of the master plan and a bit about how we're going to work through issues of equity and serve children and families in a more equitable and inclusive way. And so we also have this great video that we're gonna hope technology cooperates with, and we can show you now.
Some of the challenges that I faced as a single mom and as a young mom was finding quality daycare for my son, especially for my son. He has sensory processing disorder. It does look a lot like autism, but it's not. There's a lack of understanding in that field. Also, a lot of people would think that I didn't discipline him, or that he just wasn't choosing to listen. He couldn't crisscross applesauce, and that's one of the signs of the sensory processing. They'll sit in a W, and he was doing the W. His teacher saw that as he doesn't want to sit down. And right after the second suspension, it was not because he was hitting or biting or anything. It was because he wouldn't sit and listen. I, as a caregiver, I kind of saw the signs. And when we did like the in-depth research with his doctors, and it took a long time, we said, okay, sensory processing. This is nothing to be afraid of. Children learn differently, period. We have to include everyone. We have to have play groups for everyone. We have to have play groups for children with special needs, but with inclusion. I strongly believe in inclusion. I feel like there's good medicine there. It's important that we as a group, as a community, have these classrooms, because it'll stop the stigma. It breaks the stigma with the children, and it breaks the stigma with the parent. It's a beautiful thing that we all learn different. Everybody could do anything they want, no matter what they look like, no matter how they speak, how they talk, because it's that fire and it's that drive that pushes us, not how we speak, not how we stutter, not how we look. It's the drive and passion, and that's gonna come from early child development. That's gonna come from the parents. That's gonna come from the teachers that say you can do all things. All things are possible for you. But if we don't give that opportunity, what are we doing? We're just closing doors, and we shouldn't do that. We need to have open doors for everybody to be included.
Great. Well, before I turn it over to my colleague Aressa Coley, I wanted to step back and just show you how the master plan really built, not only on our PDGI grant, but on a Blue Ribbon Commission report that was released in 2018 and encompassed a wide range of recommendations from stakeholders, legislative leaders, and others that helped inform what ultimately did become the master plan for early learning and care. This slide does a nice job of showing how we ultimately got to the master plan and how we focused on families and providers and infrastructure and previous reports. The PDGR builds on the initiatives and lessons learned from the PDGI to create sustainable systems for early learning and care and to deliver what all kids in California need: comprehensive early learning and care from the day they're born through the start of school. The PDGR will catalyze progress toward the state's goals through essential investments in workforce development, integrated data systems, and comprehensive family supports in alignment with other state initiatives to ensure that successes garnered are carried forth through sustainable systems improvements in services and in service to the state's long-term goals. So with that high-level overview of the master plan and how we got here, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Arissa Coley, to quickly go through some of the goals contained in the plan. Arissa?
Thank you, Chris, and hello, everyone. My name is Arissa Coley. I am the Director of Early Childhood Integrated Systems and Policies at West Ed, and I'm going to walk us through a high-level overview of the master plan's goals and recommendations. From November 2019 through December of 2020, West Ed led a team for California to develop the master plan for early learning and care under the direction of the governor and his cabinet and the Health and Human Services Agency. The master plan's recommendations are organized under 4 overarching goals that drive access, quality, opportunity, and affordability for California's early childhood system. This slide reflects that high-level overview of the 4 goals and the focus areas within each goal, and I'll provide a little more details of each goal and some of the strategies encompassed within each goal in the following slides. But the first goal focuses on unifying and strengthening programs and services to support children's early learning and development. This goal is supported by several strategies to unify and strengthen programs that support infants and toddlers, help us to achieve universal preschool, expand access to paid family leave, and ensure all children are treated equitably and can equitably access services that are needed to thrive. The second goal really focuses on supporting children's learning and development by enhancing educator competencies, incentives, and funding career pathways, and implementing supportive program standards. Oh, and actually, if you could go back to slide 7. Thank you. Strategies to support this goal include enhancing, one more back. Include supporting workforce competencies and aligning program standards, and really thinking critically and intentionally about how we can design a workforce system that doesn't just require more of providers, but provides pathways and supports them as they advance along their career pathways. And third goal focuses on unifying funding to advance equity and opportunity and incorporate strategies to more equitably support parents and providers using sliding scale fees and a set of recommendations for developing a transparent formula for how we as a state define a reimbursement rate that accounts for California's size and diversity. And the final goal really hits on a lot of what was covered in the Hunt Institute's presentation around streamlining early childhood governance and administration to improve equity. And within this goal, there are several strategies to enhance our system's infrastructure, including recommendations for streamlined eligibility to improve family access and their experiences as they navigate the system, developing statewide integrated data systems and using that data to inform policy and funding decisions, and supporting all childcare settings, including family childcare providers, renovating facility needs, and recommendations on scaling shared services networks. So let's take a deeper dive into the first goal that really focuses on unifying program standards. We know that we need to build an early childhood system on the bedrock of equity by updating program guidelines and providing early learning and care options that support the inclusion of children with disabilities, address the opportunities associated with multilingualism for dual language learners, prohibit suspensions and expulsions, and enhances our ability to collect and use data to bring attention to equity. For our youngest children, we need to ensure that our lowest income families benefit from paid family leave. We must also simplify programs for families and providers to more easily understand options and effectively administer programs. This includes offering universal preschool for all 4-year-olds and all eligible 3-year-olds, as well as children with disabilities through a mixed delivery system that's inclusive of private and publicly funded programs. Additionally, within this goal, there are strategies that help the state to advance equity by ensuring new investments fund training and incentives that will impact changes in practices that lead to better experiences and outcomes for children and their families. Another key component of this plan is the workforce. We all know that without a well-qualified and well-supported workforce, none of these recommendations are possible. The master plan adopts recommendations from the Institutes of Medicine to create a multi-tiered competency-based approach to workforce development with the ability to meet this full range of mixed delivery system through coursework, experience, and practice. So really the triangulation of all of the critical expertise that's needed to thrive within the early childhood workforce. Strategies within this goal area include streamlining standards and creating multiple pathways through community-based on-ramps and off-ramps, as well as more explicit connections to higher education pathways to create stackable credentials. So really focused on building out that full continuum for the early childhood workforce that creates these clear career pathways. These standards include the requirement for every provider at every level to have knowledge and best practices for serving children with disabilities, dual language learners, and children experiencing trauma. Our third goal focuses on funding. Where and how we invest our money is a direct reflection of our priorities, and how we allocate such resources speak directly to equity. A key component of the master plan was to create a cost model for implementing change and to offer a new structure aimed at providing incentives to expand and improve equity. The master plan incorporates strategies to more equitably support parents and providers using sliding scale fees and a set of recommendations for a transparent formula for how we define a reimbursement rate that accounts for California's size and diversity. So really helping to create that equalizing and stabilizing force that drives equitable allocations of resources. And the final goal, which again really mirrors a lot of what we heard from the Hunt Institute's presentation, is focused on governance and administration. This is really everything within the master plan is really anchored by the critical structures that enable the system to work better for families, providers, and programs in support of equity. So this includes removing barriers to access by streamlining eligibility and considering extending eligibility to populations with the greatest need, such as foster youth, as an example. And also includes fully developing integrated data systems to ease navigation for families and providers, and focusing on equity through the use of data to assess practices, operations, and their impact on children and families. Recommendations within this area also include strategies for investing in facility improvements and expansion, as well as redesigning the quality improvement system to align to those changes that were described under the workforce goal and those changes in program standards that establish intermediary networks to provide critical administrative, data collection, and professional learning supports to providers through opportunities such as shared services networks. And of course, when we really think about funding and all that's needed, as Chris mentioned earlier, this master plan really reflects a 10-year roadmap for investments. And so with this is the understanding that transforming the early childhood system will take time and intentionality through purposeful changes in the system and significant resources. And really through some of those calculations range from an investment of $2 billion to $12 billion over 10 years, supported through public investments, business contributions, philanthropy, and family fees. And the variation that you see here in costs, of course, $2 billion to $12 billion, there's quite a big range there, but that variation in cost is really a reflection of the different options and implementing those major reforms over time to improve access, quality, and how we fund the system. And really and truly making California for all kids, kind of coming back to the governor's vision and mission for California's early childhood system, making that a reality will require more funding. But we also recognize that money alone is not the answer. Improving the early childhood system will take structure, will, time, and money. And a lot of that really centers around strong systems within the governance and administration goal area. So with that, I will turn things back over to Chris Perry.
Great, thanks, Aressa. So that concludes our overview of the California Master Plan for Early Learning and Care. And Dan, I'm going to turn it back over to you to see if we'd like to talk about it a little bit. I'm really looking forward to the Fireside Chat portion of this presentation, because as we know, plans are one thing. Implementing a plan is an entirely different endeavor. And we have two of the strongest leaders in our early childhood system with us today to talk about what it's been like since December of last year, implementing portions of the plan. So if there are any questions about the plan itself, happy to address those. But
absolutely, and we'll meet those agency leaders here in just a couple of minutes. But Chris, I think you and I have a couple of minutes to talk a little bit more about the context in California. Before we do, though, I recognize that there may be people who are going to watch this after the fact and may not have access to the chat. In the chat, you have been sharing some wonderful resources, and I wanted to give you just a second to talk about what you've shared and what you were suggesting that viewers might want to go out and find to learn more.
Oh, thanks for that. So we created an interactive website for the plan because, you know, so often now we're bogged down in lengthy documents, and we may only be interested in a portion of this plan at given point. So the interactive site allows you to essentially ask a question. So what is a quality, you know, what is quality, or how will we increase the workforce, or how will we support their ongoing training and technical assistance? And you're able to drill into parts of the plan that might get more at what's of interest to you at that time. There are also those video, we saw one just now, but there are other videos that highlight different parts of the plan so that we create some excitement about this master plan. It was a lot of hard work. It reflects not only the leadership of right now, but we really tried to carry forward recommendations from other reports and frankly from parents and providers who live in the system every day. And often we mean to, but we don't always design systems that are parent-centered, human-centered, child-centered in a way that helps us really go beyond where we've been. So please take a look at our link, California for All Kids.chhs.ca.gov. Right.
Well, I want to ask you a little bit more, Chris, about the context in which this happened, because I'm imagining, you know, anytime we're able to hold up an example of a state that has done big, bold work, you know, I'm sure I'd be surprised if there aren't at least a few people who are watching right now thinking, gosh, I wish we could get something like that accomplished, but you know, we have X challenge or Y challenge in our state. So I want to hear a little bit more about sort of how the plan came to be. And you know, I mentioned earlier, Missouri, you know, creating their Office of Childhood, New Mexico creating a cabinet agency, and you know, sort of contextualized by saying, you know, it was a lot to do, I think, for those states in a relatively short period of time. But sometimes when the right leadership is in place, you get just the right moment. And I recognize that, you know, Governor Newsom campaigned for governor of California very much on an early childhood platform. So maybe we start with sort of the political context. What has it meant in the state to have a governor who has, you know, really taken this on as an issue and kind of led the charge?
Well, it's a lot like what you know what Governor Hunt did, in North Carolina, and the legacy is real. That you're sitting there today helping other states realize a vision that he had almost 2 decades ago. And Governor Newsom once was Mayor Newsom, and when he was mayor of San Francisco, he worked really hard on creating universal access to high quality early learning programs, and left that legacy for San Francisco. They continue to benefit from that legacy. One of the most important parts of his leadership as a governor has been not only bringing together leaders around early care and education, but more broadly around whole child. So back in 2019, when he came in with a mandate to look and work hard on early childhood development and child development, he was also thinking about health and wellness and how to disrupt poverty and how to address social determinants of health, how to create a system that centered on racial equity. And there have been no less than, there have been dozens, maybe hundreds of policy changes that affect those various components of a family's daily life that go from housing and transportation to clean air and clean water to child savings accounts and reforms to our child support system. So there have been so many adjacent policy changes, all with an eye toward, a family-friendly, young child, family-friendly state. And it isn't enough to just think about your early childhood investments, although to those of us on this call here today, those are our kind of where we spend the most of our time. But really, there are colleagues all over the state working in places that you wouldn't expect, working really hard on early childhood. And that is to realize his vision when he came in of increasing those investments in families' economic health and wellness over many, many, many years. And I think we're starting to see the payoff, but we're also seeing additional strain on the system from COVID-19 and this sort of second pandemic, third pandemic that gets more to behavioral health and other supports that families are crying out for. That he also, with a recent $4.4 billion investment in behavioral health for children birth to 25, is trying to get ahead of that second pandemic in ways that, again, I think are consistent with what he said he would do when he ran, which is put children and families first. And so I think those legacies are really important.
Absolutely, an important piece of the context for sure. And you raised COVID, so I wanted to ask you about it. I'm trying to remember the exact timing, but it seems to me like this came out either just before or relatively early in the pandemic. How has the process of the past 18 months either changed the plan or changed how you've had to implement it?
It definitely impacted the degree to which we could engage with stakeholders during the planning process. Again, why we relied so heavily on the Blue Ribbon Commission's work, which met with thousands of stakeholders, and we were able to do some things virtually. We relied on our Early Childhood Policy Council, of which both Sarah Neville Morgan and Kim Johnson, who's chair, belong. And so we really had to use other venues to get input on this plan. We even partnered with IDEO.org to help us with some human-centered design work in looking at, if we were to try this in the system, how would it feel? And we interacted directly with parents and shared some of those ideas with them to get their feelings about those recommendations. And then when we went to roll it out, which was December 1st of last year, right? This is still the height of the pandemic. We don't have vaccines yet. And we're suffering, right? The economy here was really suffering from all the closures. And yet at the same time, we've been fortunate, like other states, to receive federal support, relief and recovery dollars that have in some ways accelerated our progress in implementing portions of the plan. I mean, well, I don't want to steal Kim and Sarah's thunder around what we're able to do for 4-year-olds that went beyond what we would have thought in 21, 22 or through 25, 26, but it's been, in some ways an opportunity for transformation. And those federal dollars we're using them as we hoped to with the plan. So my last point on this was, many people said, why do a master plan when we're all shut down and you can't meet with the public? And these things are really challenging. And we, the leadership team around it, thought, well, we're going to need one because we're going to come out of this pandemic in a very different state. And we're going to have many, many hard decisions to make about future investment. So I'm really proud of the work we did and the team that came together to get it done.
That's exciting. You know, you said something really interesting earlier that I just wanted to tease out with you. You know, you said that these changes take sometimes not just years but decades to accomplish. And we talked about how Governor Newsom having kind of an early childhood agenda as governor, helped to provide some of the spark to get this moving. How is the state making plans for administrations to come and to keep all of this great momentum going, over a longer term, recognizing that there are always, new elections on the horizon and new priorities as people come into office?
Right. And, one thing that one of the greatest strengths of California, right, is our legislature, who has been working on this for decades and will always work on early childhood. It's a priority in the state. We have a separately elected autonomous superintendent of public instruction in California, who also, is elected or reelected. There are a variety of leaders in these roles, but the governor's role is unique in the sense that he makes a number of appointments. But he also has an opportunity to invest in infrastructure and in systems. And one of the key points we were trying to make with our presentation was how important these systems are, because they take a long time to build. And you do establish teams around them, teams of people that continue to work on them, whether there's a change in the governor's office or not. And we're really proud of the progress we're making on for example, the professional development system. Really putting something together that will live on past anyone who's currently elected. We're really proud of the fact that we're moving as fast as we can on an early childhood information data system, and the ways in which we're making it easier for families to interact with our data. Putting systems in place that allow them to search for real-time data and openings and closures and those sorts of things. And so that will all live on beyond this administration. And it's not the sort of cool, interesting stuff. It can get very technical very fast, but the reality is, this is how you do a better job connecting these important services and supports to real families, is you create connections. And once those connections are in place, parents want them, they will demand them. And part of how people get into elected office is through public support, public demand, public will. That will be true, in going forward for future people who run and win and have to do this.
Great. Well, we're about to turn things over for our fireside chat to end the conversation, but I wanted to just ask you one last question, Chris, and that is, when the idea of creating a master plan, of bringing all the stakeholders together and getting everybody pulling in one direction, is much easier said than done. So to those that are watching today, what advice would you give to them in terms of the great lessons from California in terms of how to get everybody on the same page for kids and moving in a coordinated direction?
Well, it is really challenging, but I think what we're here to do is to respond to demand, and the demand for additional care, that more spaces, higher quality spaces, a more diverse set of settings and options. We're very clear here that we need to respond to those needs as quickly as we can. So when I bring up things like data systems or professional development, those are really sort of in service to or in support of responding to the overarching demand that California parents and Californians really want a high quality early care and learning system. And we're moving in that direction. And so by responding to that public demand, and it comes through all channels. It can come through social media, it can come through legislative staff, legislative leaders, it can come through the governor's office, it comes directly to department directors and deputy superintendents. When you start realizing there's a tipping point that people really want a change, that's when it feels like it's easier to row together. So I'd say really be listening carefully to what people are asking for.
Great advice. Well, it is time for us to transition to the third chunk of our time together today, and that is a special fireside chat conversation with two of the California agency leaders who are helping to make all of this great work happen in the state. And to moderate that conversation, I'm going to bring into the discussion now our president and CEO at the Hunt Institute, Dr. Javed Siddiqui. Javed.
Thanks, Dan. It's Chris, good to see you. Thank you for everybody participating in this session on sustaining early childhood governance. As Dan mentioned, my name is Javed Siddiqui. I have the good fortune of serving as the president of the Hunt Institute, which we're located in Cary, North Carolina. The Institute is a creation of our founder and chairman. I appreciate the shout out from Chris, four-term North Carolina Governor Jim Hunt, who is a regarded early childhood governor. We're an education policy resource to governors, state lawmakers, and other senior elected officials and administrative across the country. So our time together is we've already been filled with wonderful content on early childhood governance across the states and spotlight on the work California's achieved. We know changes and even conversations on early childhood governance take support across all stages. Administration, California's, as Chris pointed out, very unique with having an elected superintendent as well, to accompany the governor. But joining us to provide a firsthand perspective this afternoon is Kim Johnson, who's the director of the California Department of Social Services, and Sarah Neville Morgan, who's the deputy superintendent for opportunities for all branch, California, with the California Department of Education. So we're going to approach this and rather than go back and forth, I'm going to come and pose a few questions to Kim, and then I'll take a few questions with Sarah. And then if time permits, we'll have a few additional questions. But Kim, I'm going to start with you. It's easy to see that California has and continues to achieve exciting and innovative measures in early childhood. I'd like to begin our conversation today by asking you to provide an explanation of your position and the role your state agency serves in supporting early childhood.
Sure, and just thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the Hunt Institute's work and leadership in this space. So yes, Kim Johnson, I'm the director of the California Department of Social Services in California. This department is also the single state agency for our child welfare services work. We are the administrator of our TANF, our Temporary Aid to Needy Families program, our SNAP program and food assistance, home visiting. We obviously also here in California are working very hard as our governor has prioritized in addressing homelessness. So we have a number of housing and homelessness programs that this department administers. But we are covering the lifespan. So we also are the statewide administrator for serving and developing programs for people who are aged, blind, or disabled through our in-home supportive services program. We also license the child care programs across the state, children's residential programs, and adult and senior care. We also have a body of work that's related to immigrant integration, including our primary responsibility of resettling refugee populations. And then, of course, as of July of this year, we are now the lead administrator in the state of California for the Child Care and Development Fund. And while we had previously administered a number of child care and development programs prior, this is a big change into the conversation that's taken place already on this panel, right? We are intending and absolutely working to try to enable that whole family approach to service of children and families with this shift and change, but also remaining and connecting and linking the work that the Department of Education is doing in this space as well, especially as it relates to preschool and transitional kindergarten. I just also note that the Department of Social Services does many more things, but I wanted to focus on those. We also sit within the California Health and Human Service Agency, which Chris just mentioned and is a part of. So that's also that direct linkage and connection to the departments running early intervention services, running our healthcare services, and much more. So again, situated in a space where we are looking to bring together all of these approaches together in an attempt to truly disrupt poverty and ensure children and families and additional populations have the resources they need to thrive and succeed.
California's master plan for early learning and care is a robust example of an articulated need by a state to improve their early childhood system. Can you share some insights on the process the state has taken to gain the support needed to get to this to the point we're currently at?
Sure, and into the conversation that was happening early, I want to shout out to the community leaders across the state and other states across this nation who have been prioritizing children and families for many years. But I think it's that leadership that has led to the ability to have other leaders within our state, this real tremendous opportunity we have that Chris mentioned. And let me just start with our Governor Newsom. It's certainly in the last couple of years, part of our approach in being responsive to all of the needs of communities in the pandemic, were for the governor to bring kind of his cabinet leaders together physically in one space for many months in the very early years. And through that time, just had the opportunity, it's just completely refreshing as a former early childhood advocate prior to joining state government to have a governor who fully understands the economic impact of childcare, who's a father of 4 and understands it from a personal level as well. But the governor's commitment of not only dedicating positions and leadership within his administration and office on early childhood within the Health and Human Services Agency, as Chris is sitting in that position, but also we also have a Secretary of Health and Human Services, Mark Galley, who's a pediatrician. Chris mentioned we have a Surgeon General who's also focused in this space and done a tremendous amount of work on adverse childhood experiences, et cetera. So it's just amazing to have the opportunity where you have leaders, including the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond, who's focused on early learning as well, and inclusive practices, who supports bilingualism. You know, it's across the board right now in the state of California. We have tremendous leaders in these positions, and we also have the long-standing support of our legislature, especially our Women's Caucus, who has prioritized investments in this space for many, many years. So I just am grateful for the opportunity to serve in such a time with this kind of momentum and support, as Chris mentioned, in the space. And so I think all of that matters in terms of how we've gotten here to a master plan, how we are using the work of many plans and roadmaps prior. I'm sure in other states across the country, you have plans. And so this attempt with the master plan was really taking the best of those recommendations, really ensuring that research and evidence base was also there. And so here we are with a cast of leaders focused in investing in the space and really making a change with a roadmap to get us there.
And one more question before I come to you, Sarah. In addition to your current role as at the California Department of Social Services, you've actually had the opportunity to work in leadership roles across a variety of settings impacting the early childhood years. What would you say are the common elements of successful early childhood systems, and how can system leaders communicate such to stakeholders in their state?
Yeah, the coordination component is a big one, and as has been mentioned on this panel and conversation. And what I would say is that one way in which we are approaching this work, and certainly a priority of our department, as well as our agency, is really taking that person-centered focus. We have many funding streams and fund sources that come into the state that are for a specific purpose, with a specific objective in mind. And here, when you're leading with service for the person, for the family, for the child, it really provides and presents the opportunity to look at the integration and intersections of the various funding sources. So we are doing things like developing guides to drive and steer integration of those resources. A lot of what's been said is starting with the families themselves and engaging with them in communities to understand what they need to be more successful in what they're going. I think I have the privilege of having regular touch points with many families receiving subsidies, childcare subsidies in our state. And they say every time, I don't want to tell my story over and over again. I want to tell it, and I want then the array of resources that are available to me to be presented. And so that's, I think, a big chunk of the work we're doing around coordination of space on both the entry, as was mentioned, how do you get connected to both childcare and other services, especially for low-income families, but also on the back end, how are we verifying things where that check stub or that income eligibility is determined on the back end and kind of feeding to the various staff and programs that then the families engaged with. So I would just say that using that person-centered approach, using an equity lens to everything we do, and using data to drive our action is part of the success that we've seen in California to make those components come together.
Great, thank you. Sarah, let me shift the conversation to you and to really get to the role of the California Department of Education in this space. As discussed earlier, it is easy to see that California is achieving exciting and innovative measures in early childhood. Will you provide an explanation of your position and the role your state agency serves in supporting early childhood?
Sure, thank you so much. And just a huge shout out hi to everybody, including Kim, who I hardly ever get to see at this point because we're both so busy. So in my role, I'm a Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction. So I'm part of our state superintendent, who is a separately elected constitutional officer of his executive cabinet. And in that role, we really are very focused on ensuring that every single student receives the opportunities they need to succeed both in school, but also in life, so that college to career piece. And we also have a large scope. We have about 6.3 million students in public education in California. So realize that is larger than some states' entire population. And we have some of the largest school districts in the country, but we also have some really small ones. So looking at school districts that have 1 to 5 kindergartners enrolled, and they never know each year, are they going to actually have someone show up for kindergarten or not? So that huge diversity across that. In that, my branch is the Opportunities for All branch, and people are probably like, well, what would that be? In that branch, we have early education. So both our California State Preschool Program, as well as the rollout for what California has now for our universal preschool, which is called transitional kindergarten for all 4-year-olds. We have an expanded learning division, which is all of those after school programs. So California has additional money beyond those of you who have 21st century funds. So we have our own state funding that supports expanded learning for before and after school enrichment. Our multilingual support division, which has Title III and Title I Part C, so looking at English learners and migrant students, and nutrition services, so all of those school meal programs, and then special education. So IDA Part B, really focused on ages 3 through 22, and then 619, which is very deeply focused on the preschool age, and a little bit of Part C, looking at the birth to age 3. So with all of that, what we have done is sort of tie it together at the branch level and create a preschool through 3rd grade alignment initiative to really address a lot of historic investments that Chris was pointing out earlier that really allow California to more deeply focus and achieve the best possible outcomes for our young students in those early grades across all of that.
Well, similar to Kim, you've also had an extensive background, wide array of leadership experiences across that have impacted early childhood education. What would you say are the common elements of successful early childhood systems, and how can these system leaders communicate such to stakeholders in their state?
Well, I feel like Kim said a lot of them. So starting with that human-centeredness, definitely a role in an area that we're really trying to do within the department as well. And also I've done, as you said, I feel like, are you saying that we move jobs a lot? But in that space of saying, yes, there has to be that commonality of really focused on who are you serving and why, what is your purpose and why are you there? And that stays the same across all of that. We're really trying to dive deeply into the child and that student and what is that student's experience and what do they need? so that if we're looking at the teachers and the educators, whether they be in childcare or in preschool or in 3rd grade or in 10th grade, what sort of rich learning experiences do we want those students to feel, and what supports do those teachers then need to do that? So going very much back to children's experiences, and how do we ensure that children can thrive?
Great. And you mentioned Tony Thurman, the superintendent, is actually a fellow with our part of our Hunt Kane Leadership Fellows program. So we've had a good chance to visit with him and learn from him. And he's spoken about this UTK. The Department of Education is implementing Universal Transitional Kindergarten, which some states call UPK. Briefly, can you share with us how you are also building a pre-3 approach?
Yeah, so I love that Tony's able to speak to that now. He has fully embraced that piece of universal preschool and is really uplifting it. So in California, we like to do everything in the most complicated way possible, I think. So in order to create a expanded educational system, a few years ago, they were able to take a cohort of young children that would have been in kindergarten, move them into the first year of a 2-year kindergarten program called Transitional Kindergarten. And in this year's budget, we're now expanding that to capture all 4-year-olds over the next couple of years. We saw that as such an opportunity to take that P3 initiative that we had started last year and really say, okay, now we're in that educational space. We've heard for years, let's do P3, and tend to focus on sort of the birth to 5 and then never fully launch up into those early grades. But with that first year of our universal preschool being firmly in our educational system, we're then able to work with kindergarten first, second, and really tie those together. We also have an opportunity to take our preschool learning foundations and use those as a scaffold and really push up and through as a framework around, if you're looking at what children need in preschool, how would that then look as they move up into the state Common Core standards? So a lot of opportunities there, but we really see universal preschool as the foundation of what we can do in P3 across California. And I can also say it's gotten a lot of attention. So now, not only do I have the state superintendent talking about it, but we've heard people in budget conversations talk about P3. We've had some assembly education speakers talk about it. I've gone to a district and they will comment on the fact that with this P3 piece, they want to move forward in their own district. So a lot of attention on this opportunity around a preschool to 3rd grade alignment initiative.
Well, yeah, I'm going to pose a question to both of you because you both sort of alluded to, I heard the word momentum, obviously budget people are talking about this. How would you compare, and Kim, I'm going to come to you first. How would you compare today's early childhood system with that of 10 to 20 years ago? And what are the lessons we can learn?
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to our history together, Sarah. We've both been in the field that long. So it's a great question. What I would say is it's a significant shift on a number of fronts. One is that we in California have also now for the first time and just entered into our first main agreement earlier this year with Child Care Providers United. So we have collective bargaining for our in-home, our family child care programs. And that main agreement and that conversation that we're having about the infamous C word of compensation, and that we're talking about competencies for the workforce and the qualifications that we want to work on together moving towards that space. This is a huge pivotal moment for us here, and the partnership with that group and those programs is just key to our success as we look at that's typically in California, our in-home or family child care providers are the ones who are taking care of our youngest, our babies. And so we just are really appreciative of that opportunity. I think that this federal administration, our president, and this plan for investment in this space and what we've already seen in terms of receipt of investments that we've never seen before is just tremendous. And so again, what a gift to have a roadmap and a plan through the master plan to think about already, right? Having that framework already built in terms of where we would invest. But again, kind of the partnership of communities to implement is just key and significant. And so we have had iterations of early learning councils in California for over that time span. And right now, Sarah and I both sit on the Early Childhood Policy Council, which is ultimately responsible for implementing this master plan. And I think that too, the composition, the ways we're engaging, the ways we're thinking about these things together is key. But I would definitely say that the shift in investment, historic, unprecedented, the leadership that we have, and then also, of course, the engagement that we're having with our partners and communities is what's setting us up for success, and feels like we are going together in some very big and major ways with the investments Sarah just mentioned, with looking at how our reimbursement rates are going to be tied into qualifications and standards for the various components and programs of our workforce. It's just, we're here. The day has arrived. So it's a great opportunity for us, and feels like we are making progress in a real way.
I was actually reflecting on that a couple of days ago, because I came into the state and first worked for First 5 California, where Chris actually worked for a time period too. And that was the whole neurons to neighborhoods, right? So you had the Newsweek with the cover with the baby on it, and there was so much attention on brain development. And the momentum from that spread, I think, more strongly through the early childhood world, and didn't get into, at least not in California, into the rest of our educational system as strongly. And now with universal preschool, we're starting to see more and more attention around, oh, wait, we have to take some responsibility around these younger children. And seeing the possibility for all of those superintendents and school boards and all those others to really embrace the Heckman curve and understand how that needs to now impact their thinking as they look across their budgets and their planning, right? Like really deep planning and those partnerships that they have to do. So to me, that is a huge sea change in California in where education sits and how they now have to partner more closely with early learning and care to create what we keep saying our California schools need to be. Our California schools, probably a lot of schools across the country, were still based in 1950, maybe even 1900. And yet what families need are preschool services. They need before and after school. They can't leave their jobs at 11:30 or 1:30 or 3 to go pick up their young child. And they need multilingual programs. So they want their child engaged in something that helps them with their home language and development of English. We need stronger special education and more inclusive opportunities. And really some of these state investments and where we are now are starting to see that possibility and make it happen. So lots of change, but based on actually knowledge from 20, 25 years ago.
Great, thank you. I know we're running out on time, so I have one last question. I'll ask both of you to sort of offer some brief reflections. An element of successful early childhood systems is the collaboration across state agencies. It's very clear that you guys know each other. Obviously, you need to see each other more, so maybe find some time to plug in and have coffee, but obviously you're working together. Can you share lessons learned throughout California's process? What recommendations do you have for other states that may be listening? Sarah, we'll start with you on this one.
Sure. So I think it does help when you already have that relationship. COVID has not made it easy. So I think both Kim and I saw a real explosion in our jobs, and then the amount of attention we had to do to immediate, urgent pieces. And so that kind of moved people away from more of that long-term strategic planning. If we hadn't had the master plan to keep grounded in that, it would have been really hard to move forward with some of those, because we were so much in the right, Kim, like, how are we getting supplies out to the field? What can we do from education to collect information? How do we send it over to Department of Social Services so they can get it out? Who coordinates it? But with Chris, I think we had 7:30 a.m. calls for like 3 months, where every single day we were jumping on, touching base, making sure we were all coordinated and that each agency was doing their part to move the work forward. So it's hard to find time and space, and there's a lot of coordination. And sometimes we have to go deep into our own internal work to get it where it needs to be. but always keeping in mind where are those touch points and how do we connect across them?
I would just add that for other states out there, again, I think we do have a lot of commonalities in terms, we might not have the same amount and level, but we have the same, a lot of the same federal funding streams coming into our communities. So I think a couple things I'd say, again, I think which are thematic this morning for us in California, which are engage with the people you serve, listen, and they will tell you what they need to be successful. And by doing that, and then being here in the background with the various sister departments and agencies, right, and understanding what our obligations are to our funding streams and resources, find those opportunities to integrate, to be the glue in the bridges that bring things, efforts to invest where we know it's going to make a difference ultimately in the people that we're here to serve. And I think that's really what matters. It goes back to what we were talking about being focused on the people as opposed to the fund source. And I think that makes all the difference to achieve the outcomes that we're striving toward for children and families in our communities.
Great. That's a good way to wrap up the conversation. That's actually a great reflection. I appreciate both Kim and Sarah for your time. Dan, Chris, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Thanks so much.
Fantastic. Javed and Sarah and Kim, thank you so much for taking the time to shine a little bit closer spotlight on the great things that are happening in California. Chris, we're just so impressed by all that's happening there.
Well, I am too. I'm listening to my colleagues and I'm just beaming with pride because they have led our state through one of the more difficult periods. And they didn't just get us through a crisis, they were also thinking about 10 years from now while they did it. And it's a phenomenal accomplishment on their part, and they do such a good job. I'm really proud to be here with them. And I think California is a reflection of its elected leaders, and the superintendent and the governor and our legislative leaders have really come together to allow us to work on these programs and fund them. And it's a real honor. So thanks.
Well, no question. This question of early childhood governance can be a challenging one. I mean, these are complex systems that are spread in some cases, as I mentioned, across multiple agencies. We've got multiple funding streams. Lots of ways for this to become challenging. But as California is exemplifying, and some of the examples that we shared a little bit earlier, states are making great progress on the early childhood governance front. And I think we will continue to see a trend toward the consolidation of these services to make these systems a little bit less fragmented. Whether that consolidation means kind of physically consolidating, or whether it is kind of a formal structure like the master plan or like the state advisory councils that we talked about early on to help to bring the right stakeholders to the table, I think is a conversation that will be left up to you and to your states. And so, I would throw in one last time that, if there is a way that we at the Hunt Institute can be a support to you as you are having these state system and governance conversations in your states, we would love to hear from you and love to think through what sort of role we could play. I want to just take a moment to thank certainly my colleague, Dr. Lauren Zabinski, who is Deputy Director for Early Learning Policy at the Hunt Institute, Chris Perry, Deputy Secretary and Senior Advisor to the Governor of California and the California Health and Human Services Agency, Arisa Coleman, Project Director of the Preschool Development Grant for West Ed, Kim Johnson, Director of the California Department of Social Services, and Sarah Neville Morgan, Deputy Superintendent for Opportunities for All branch at the California Department of Education. It's a rock star panel to bring together on a Wednesday afternoon, and it is great to see you all and to have this conversation. And Deborah, I think we're going to turn things back over to you to wrap us up.
Yes, thank you, Dan. And I just need a couple more minutes, maybe 1 minute. I wanted to call your attention to a couple of resources to also get more information. And I am going to toggle to my Zoom so that I can also share this information in the chat. But please visit the Early Childhood Technical Training and Technical Assistance website. The PDG site has several resources, especially if you notice the section on the lower right-hand side, establishing governance and sustainable partnerships for more information. In addition, I wanted to be sure that you are aware and visit the Early Care or Child Care and Early Education Research Connections website. There's a wealth of resources focused on policy and research on that website that, again, for more information. With that, I want to echo Dan's ditto on all of the thanks that Dan shared to our presenters, our panelists. This was amazing. California, thank you so much for sharing your journey. We all learn from each other, and we appreciate the opportunity to be able to get some best practices for what's working well in California and how we can apply those things in our state. Thank you all for being here. Have a great rest of the conference, and we'll see you at the next session in about 29 minutes. Thank you. Bye. Okay,